Hello everyone, Kate from the Narrate team here. This week we started a brand new series called I Loathe Authority. Adam starts us off in this conversation by talking about our attitudes towards authority and how easy it is for the mighty to fall.
If you've not seen the episode of Seinfeld that involves Festivus, you need to go watch that. You know what I think? You know what I think we like about Seinfeld? I just throw this out there for your consideration. I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that they loathe authority. Like that there's something about each of them and the characters, Elaine and Kramer and George and Jerry. There's this part of all of them, isn't there, that just is constantly trying to stick it to the man, to kind of constantly prove like they don't have to follow the rules. And I think doesn't it kind of appeal to that part of all of us? This morning we're kicking off a brand new series, and I think maybe the best way to just start it would be to say, have you noticed that you arrived at disliking authority kind of honestly? Have you ever recognized that it seems almost innate that anybody who has more power, more influence, more money, more resource, just more than you, that there's this, it seems innate, natural predisposition to see them as threatening? Have you noticed that in yourself? I kind of think you have, because I think that's part of the DNA of Narrate. There's part of us, right, that goes like, no, we don't have to follow the rules. We don't have to do, who says we have to do it that way? And there was a time in my life where I used to think that was because I was immature, and people helped me to see that was why that was the case. There was a time where I thought that was just kind of part of maybe my family of origin. And don't get me wrong, I think that family of origin, or especially a bad experience with authority, like if you're someone that's experienced abuse of the most unspeakable kinds, physical, emotional, sexual, I mean, yeah, that can cause you to all the more distrust authority figures, can't it? But I wonder if even if your only experience with authority, whether it's teachers or principals, bosses, managers, the police officers, the government, even if your only experience with authority was positive, I wonder if you'd still have this kind of predisposed, like, I don't think I like people telling me what to do. You know, if you go back to the opening chapters of the Bible, and some of you are like, man, we always go back to Genesis. And I say the reason for that is very intentional, because I think if we're not careful, we understand Jesus without understanding the problem. And if you understand Jesus without understanding the problem, then you can make Jesus' answer have a solution that actually isn't even really the solution to the problem, if that makes any sense. And if you go back to the early pages of Genesis, just consider whether you believe it or not. I'm not even asking if you have arranged your life around these ideas, but think about those first few chapters. You have God who's created this incredible world. He's put people in charge of this world. There's this hierarchy for sure. People are under God. Creation is under people. There's this working together. There's this, maybe we would call it in our language today, this utopian reality. And consider this, like the authority figure, God, I mean, there is one, right? Like there is an authority. But the suggestion of the scripture is he's perfect. In a way that no boss or no parent, no grandparent, no principal, no teacher, no police officer, in a way that no other authority figure could ever claim to be perfect. God was perfect. The text tells us that he was all loving, all kind, gracious, just, all those things. And yet, did the fact that Adam and Eve, those first people, did the fact that their only experience with authority, the fact that was all positive, did that preclude them from having a suspicion towards people who are in charge? Did it in any way prevent them from kind of going like, wait a minute, I don't want to answer to anybody other than myself? Well, it didn't. Like that's what to me is crazy about the suggestion of those first few chapters is you have Adam and Eve, their entire experience with bosses and leaders and teachers and all those things was perfect, and yet still the entire human problem, the Bible suggests, part of what exposed that and created that problem was their own suspicion toward God's authority. A real simple question, is he good? Can I really trust him? Is he really have our best interests at heart? Coupled with another equally important question, do we really have to be underneath somebody else's power? Like, why can't we be in charge? Why do we have to answer to anybody? It's fascinating to me, and yet it's not just a biblical suggestion. You go all the way back to as far as I'm aware of, to the 3rd century BC. You have a Greek philosopher, poet, Epicurus. Not long later, another one followed along called Lucretius, and they developed what is today called Epicureanism. Now, Epicureanism was born because in those guys' reality, they lived in a world where there was these pagan spiritualities that were suggestion to the people like ourselves, the communities, the masses, that there were these little gods and that those gods are everywhere, and then if you step out of line, those gods will hurt you. And so people were being controlled by these few priests because they were being told to stay in line or else. And it was Epicurus and Lucretius who came along and went, no. Those gods aren't real. You don't have to behave because of these supposed gods are going to fry you if you don't. They're not even real. And even if they are, they're a long ways away. Epicureanism was later picked up by the French Enlightenment. Thomas Jefferson himself identified himself as an Epicurean. And what that simply means, because what happened in the medieval part of the 20th century is you had the church, those who claim to follow Jesus, doing very similar things, going, there's this God and he's everywhere, and if you step out of line, he'll fry you. And for better or for worse, the French Enlightenment and very much the thrust of Western culture came along and went, no, that's not the way he works. In fact, he's not even real. And if he is real, he's a long ways away. Like there's this desire, isn't there, to just go like, I'm not under anybody. If I could get to the top of the pile, if I could be the one who's in charge, then I'd be happy in the truest sense of the word. You know, in a recent survey, and I've read these in a few different places, asking school children, like, what is your dream career? You know, when you were in school, it was doctor and lawyer. You know what it is today? And I'm sure that these vary. Entrepreneur. Now, let me just be clear. We love small business around here. We celebrate that. If you're not clear on that, then just hang out for a few weeks, and we talk a lot about business because I think there's a lot of parallels between the kingdom and business. But I wonder if a kid who decides his dream is to just not have a boss, if that's a red flag. And I wonder if every boss, every manager, every leader here wouldn't be the first to go, man, the type of person who is the boss, who's never been the employee, that's a scary boss. Michael Gerber's recently, or not recently, it's a classic, though it's now been republished, wrote a book called E-Myth, one of the best business books out there, most read business books. He unpacks in the E-Myth that there are good reasons and bad reasons to start your own business, and he says the most common bad reason is to say, I want to keep doing what I do, but I want to fire my boss. And what he notes is that when you become the boss, your roles change. You don't get to just be the technician. What if there really is this part of us that loathes authority? And I think one of the questions, and where I'm excited, is the Christmas stories that they beg us to consider, what is the cost of that? There's a guy named Amadio Peter Giannani. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right because I'm not Italian, nor am I a linguist. But on April 16th, 1906, at 5:49 a.m., while in his home in San Mateo, California, he heard this distant sound. Kind of a rumble, kind of a sound. He would later say that it was like a freight train running by his house. Then there was a pause. 1 second, 2 seconds, then bang, and it was like his world exploded. The whole house was shifting and moving. What he quickly learned was that 17 miles to the north in San Francisco, the ground had turned to liquid. Walls were collapsing, buildings were falling down, gas lines were breaking, fire was erupting everywhere. Now, Mr. Giannani, he instantly thought of his fledgling business called the Bank of Italy. And so he began to make his 16-mile trek into town, aided initially by a train, but mostly aided by his own 2 feet. He was thinking of the cash reserves in his bank and the fact that inevitably the city was on fire and his own existence, and he wanted to rescue his imperiled cash. He was moving into the city while droves of people were coming out of the city. He eventually arrived at his bank, but there was another problem. Not only were the fires encircling his place of business, but the looters were already running rampant, prompting the mayor of San Francisco to issue a permission to all the police officers, as well as a public declaration that anybody even suspected of illegal activity was going to be shot and killed on the spot without questions. People were just running amok. So he found his cash. He knew he needed to get back to his home. He knew that that wasn't going to be an easy venture, that his life would be in danger. And so he himself, ironically, commandeered a couple wagons with oranges in them, orange crates in them. He tucked the money along with a couple team members. That's a good staff because a couple people made it their way to the bank to help him, put the cash underneath the oranges, made the long trek back to his home, and had all of his cash safe. Next day, all the bankers in San Francisco were calling for a 6-month moratorium on lending. They said, it's just too much of a disaster. Mr. Giannani said, no. We will rebuild this city. The next day, April 17th, he found his way to one of San Francisco's busiest piers, took 2 wooden barrels, wish I had a couple of those, put a plank in between them, and set up shop. Began lending to anybody who needed a small loan. Now, the small people recognized this man. They began to take loans. They also began to make deposits. In the months that followed, the Bank of Italy took off. Within just a few years, the Bank of Italy was the largest bank in California. It eventually had changed its name from the Bank of Italy to the bank you'll recognize, the Bank of America. By 1945, Bank of America was the largest corporate bank in the world. And in 1980, there was an article published in the Harvard Business Review that said this. I just quoted it for us. It says, "The Bank of America is perhaps best known for its size. It's the world's largest bank with nearly 110,000 branches, operations in more than 100 countries, and a total assets of about $100 billion. Go ahead, next slide. In the opinion of many close observers, an equally notable achievement is its quality of management. So in 1980, it was recognized not just as a monstrosity, but an incredible organization to work for. Now, had you in 1980 said to somebody that in the next 8 years, they would face a hostile takeover by a rival California bank, that they'd have to bring a retired CEO out of retirement to save the bank, that they'd had to sell their corporate headquarters in order to pay their bills, that they would have cut their dividends for the first time in 53 years, and that the value of their stock would have gone down 75%. Had you said that in 1980, it would have been kind of like saying Apple's going to go bankrupt by 2020. And yet that's exactly what happened. In just a span of 8 years, all those things happened. And Jim Collins, in one of the best business books I've read in a long time called How the Mighty Fall, suggests that if nothing else, the lesson of the Bank of America is if they can fall, anybody can fall. And I suppose the question that I'd like to pose to you, with all due respect to Mr. Collins, is it safe to say that what's true of an organization like Bank of America is true of every marriage and every family and every individual and every business leader in the room? That we're all susceptible. That no matter how far you've gone and how pure your character, no matter how great your integrity, you're vulnerable. And I guess the question that I want to ask is, what if at the root of what makes us vulnerable is that comical and at times admirable and yet incredibly dangerous thing called our disposition toward authority? I guess the question I want to ask is, what's the cost of unchecked disdain for authority? What's the cost of because it seems like the scriptures are saying, this is in you. Like it's not a sin in you. It didn't come because of sin. It was there before sin. This is in you. What's the cost of not being aware of that? And furthermore, what's the cost of not only being aware of it, but of leaving it unmanaged, of walking through life as though it's no problem whatsoever? See, this is where I think the Christmas story is, and this is where we're going to walk for these next few weeks, because it seems to me that the entire story is huddled around this gigantic conflict with authority. That in one sense we'll talk about that next week. In another sense we're under it. And in another sense, it's just like this tinderbox. And it's something not to be solved so much as it is to be managed. Let's just come with me into those first few verses about Jesus' birth according to Matthew. In Matthew chapter 2, the story starts this way. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod. Now, what's a king? You know, you walk down the street and someone says, hey, King Bob. You're going like, you're kind of a big deal, right? Like you're in charge. You're probably an egotist, but you're also in charge. I would suggest, is there anything different between King Herod than each and every one of us? Or could we say it this way, is the only thing different between Herod and each and every one of us is he arrived in a way we haven't. Like he's at the top of the pile, and we're not. He's in charge. He has all authority. He answers to no one, kind of to Caesar, but that's kind of the game they were playing. He answers to no one. And yet already then you can see, okay, so that's a problem because you've got a king who's in charge. And we're going to celebrate the birth of a king who says he's in charge. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, we'll talk more about this on Christmas Eve, but invariably we're talking about wealthy rulers. That's the only people that would have had the resource to travel to a place like these. These wise men, most likely very powerful leaders, if not kings. They came from the east. They came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? Dun, dun, dun. You see what's going on here? We're building this conflict. Two authorities, two who claim to be in charge, and they're playing in the same sandbox. And that never goes well. We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Of course he was disturbed. Like, you could ask the question, why? But when you park there, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because everything he's about is now in question. He's disturbed. Yeah, he's disturbed. There's conflict going on here. Suddenly we're back in the garden. Suddenly we're asking the question, who's really in charge? Who's really in control? Who really answers to who? And yet it's not just Herod who's disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, I don't intend this as a political comment, but just the closest parallel we can make is when you read in the Gospels and you hear the word Jerusalem, it's very safe to think of Jerusalem the way many people in our country think of D.C. They're these distant people who are all about the power and it's all about themselves and they don't really know what's going on in the real world. That was Jerusalem. To be in charge in Jerusalem meant you had to sell out to Rome. And so the reason you have this conflict is you have these wealthy people in Jerusalem who have compromised, but they don't see it as compromised, and they're in charge. So if Herod goes, they go. And if a different king shows up, well, then we've got to filter through the whole deck again. Conflict. Everyone's kind of going, what do we do here? What happens next? There's another company that I'd like to talk about. It's a company that in 1983, its chairman, Robert Galvin in 1983, he received off of the assembly line the last ever created Motorola car radio. Now, he took it off as a bit of a symbol. The business of Motorola creating car radios had come to an end. It had had a long, almost greater than 25-year run. And yet Robert Galvin instantly began to remember his roots. Because what he knew was his father, way back in 1929, he ran an organization, a company called Galvin Manufacturing. And Galvin Manufacturing and his father, they made their living creating battery eliminators for radios. Don't even know what that is, just can read the book and that's what it said. So they created battery eliminators. And in 1929, facing the Depression and a shifting market, that organization was done. There was no more need for these battery eliminators. I mean, clearly, what are they? And so he went to work. As he was laying off people and figuring out how he was going to pay bills and what he was going to do for his family, he began to experiment with radios. Eventually, he began to create car radios. And not long after, Galvin Manufacturing started to turn a profit. They changed the name to Motorola. Fast forward to 1983. When his son was in charge of the company. And so you see, Robert knew. Robert's the one on your right. That's his father on the left. He knew. He knew that the way you exist is you innovate and you create new technology. You come up with new ideas. And so Motorola, they set out in 1983 to begin to do just that. He was done riding the wave of car radio success, and they started to innovate. And some of you will remember in the 80s and into the 90s, at their peak, they were creating $27 billion of revenue a year. Motorola was Apple in every stretch in the 80s and early 90s. They were the most innovative personal electronics company going. That they were very excited in 1995 about the next big release. It was called the StarTAC cell phone. It would be the smallest cell phone ever released. It was shaped like a clamshell. They were thrilled. They were convinced. At this point, they had 50% of the market share of cell phones, and they knew this was just going to make them bigger. In fact, their goal was 75%, that every cell phone held, Steve Jobs is going, ha, ha, ha. But 75% of all phones would be Motorola. But there was one problem, and their carriers were beginning to tell them about the problem. See, the problem was that the StarTAC cell phone used analog technology. And Bell South and New York and all the different carriers across the country and the world were going, no, we don't want analog. Everything's going digital. They would have none of it. In fact, in their hubris, some would say, in their arrogance, they said, not only are we going to release an analog cell phone, despite what you're saying you want and need and will take, but we're going to insist that in order to carry the StarTAC cell phone, you're going to have to promise us that 75% of the phones within your organization are, in fact, Motorola phones, or else you don't get to carry any of them. In fact, we're going to insist upon you creating exclusive displays with just Motorola products in your storefronts. Some would say, some analysts would say, their innovation led to arrogance. And actually what happened was first Bell South in New York State, followed by many others, they called their bluff. They wouldn't take their phones. In a span of just a few years, Motorola went from over 20,000 employees, $27 billion in annual revenue, to 17% market share of cell phones, to just over 1,000 employees, to struggling to pay their bills, and ultimately facing this very quick demise. See, here's my question when we talk about authority, because no one likes it. But what if it's there to protect us? What if it's there to keep us in check? What if it's designed to protect us from the kind of arrogance that Motorola exhibited? You know, maybe you're someone that you find the Bible to be really, really distant and inaccessible and hard to get into. One of my favorite suggestions is the book of Proverbs. They're these quick-hitting, very pithy kind of statements loaded with truth. Dave Ramsey says to read the book of Proverbs is to get a master's degree in finance. I mean, this is brilliant stuff. And what makes Proverbs so fun is you can read a chapter in 3 minutes, and there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. And so if you just read a chapter a day, you just read the day that corresponds with the month, and boom. So I say all that to say that I try to do that and was doing that this week. I just want to read, I think, the 11th, which would have been Wednesday. Just a couple. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. There's this sense in which we want to believe that we're the smartest person in the room. And the older we get, the more important that is. What if that's dangerous? For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. It sounds like authority, doesn't it? Or consider chapter 12, verse 1. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. This is like a 2x4. Okay, maybe we're not getting through here. Let's just kind of make this clear. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction is stupid. It's called discipline, isn't it? It's not comfortable. None of us want it. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Let me ask you this. How are you doing with authority? Who are they? What is it? Are you aware of that part of you that hates every boss you've ever had and is suspicious of every government official that's ever been? Are you aware of this innate tendency to disdain anything that has more, anyone that has more than you? Remember those bug zappers we would use? I remember them as a kid. I don't know if anybody uses them anymore, but do you remember those things? You know, and you just kind of sit, you can already hear it in your head, right? Like, psst, psst, and there's this buzz. Have you ever just considered, like, what the bug colony, like, how those conversations went? I mean, because it's like, hey, George just died in the light. I think I'll go check out the light. Oh, I just died in the light. I mean, this is one after another, right? Like, just piling in. And then eventually Louis comes along. He's like, hey, I'm going to go check out the light. And your buddy's like, no, don't go check out the light because, like, everybody's dead. Everybody who goes to check out the light, they don't come back. Well, yeah, but I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to get up next to it and see what's going on there. But they're just dead, right? You ever wonder if you're any different than the bug? Like, don't we just keep running into the same things, person after person, time after time? I'll tell you a story about a guy named Larry Walters. I've told this story before, but it's one of my all-time favorites. Larry had a dream of flying. And so one day, while sitting in his Sears and Roebuck lawn chair, he had an epiphany. He went down to the local Army-Navy store. He bought 75 4-foot weather balloons, arranged for some helium to be delivered to his house, filled those balloons with helium, tied them to his Sears and Roebuck chair, tied his chair to the ground, strapped some stuff onto his chair. You can't see it all. But in there were some sandwiches, a 6-pack of Miller Lite, and a pellet gun. Now, Larry's goal was he was going to have his friends sever ties from the ground, and he was going to float about 40 feet up over the ground, and he was going to enjoy the afternoon in Metro LA, and then he would shoot a couple balloons, and he would come back to the ground, and he would have achieved his dream of flying. They say, though, when his friends cut the rope, it didn't gingerly raise up to 40 feet. In fact, they say it shot like a rocket. And it didn't stop at 10 feet. It didn't stop at 100 feet. It didn't stop at 1,000 feet. It didn't stop at 10,000 feet. His chair didn't come to rest until he got to 16,000 feet in elevation. At 16,000 feet, he was a little too scared to shoot a balloon. And so he just hung out, tried hitting his heels together, hoping that somehow somebody would rescue him. At one point, he floated into the primary approach corridor of LAX International Airport. They say that every air traffic controller heard the same thing. You're not going to believe this. He just hung out. It became dark. He realized that if he wasn't careful, he was going to be in China at the end of the month. And so he started shooting a few balloons. He gingerly started coming down to the ground. But he didn't land softly. He landed in power lines, and it took a rescue crew to get him. When they finally got him out of his chair, he was promptly arrested. And as he was being led to the squad car, a reporter got a microphone in front of him and said, "Larry, why did you do it?" He said, "Well, a man can't just sit around all the time." Man can't just sit around. Now, there's something endearing about the story. I know it could backfire on me. But really? Like, really? What if it's like you're an innovative crew? That's what I love about you guys. You're leaders, you're business owners, you're managers, you're entrepreneurial, you're doers. Like, you don't like this place if you're not a doer, because if you hang out here too long, we ask you to start working. You have a bias for action. I know that about you. What if that's also dangerous? What if that thing that you've come to resent, that you came out of the chute resenting, and then when you had that first abusive incident, it only made it worse. And then when you worked for this boss who wasn't kind, it made it all the... What if what the scriptures are saying, what if what Christmas is saying is be careful? See, part of what we'll explore next week is Herod thought that Jesus' authority meant that he couldn't have any. And it didn't. Herod having authority and Jesus having authority, those are not mutually exclusive ideas. But there's a hierarchy. There's an assumption that there's somebody smarter and wiser and better than me. Let me ask you this. Who are your ruthless truth tellers? Who are the people, not the friends who pat you on the butt and tell you you're the greatest thing in the world? Who are the people that they would tell you, knock it off? Who are the people that know more than you're comfortable anybody knowing? You know, this last Monday, Teresa and I, when we were back in Billings, we had this marriage counselor person who would periodically tell me I was an idiot and she was a princess, and then we would go on and live the next 5 years and our marriage would be great again. And it's true. I mean, sometimes it takes a doofus like myself to have someone else hear all the facts and then go, "You're an idiot, stop being an idiot." And that's just kind of kept us in line. And that's the way marriage works, right? It's dynamic, it's living, it doesn't change. And about the time you understand the way it works, it shifts again. And we haven't had that since we got to Helena. And this last Monday, we sat in front of our friend Joan, who many of you see. She's one of the best therapists I know. And we just kind of laid some stuff out. And listen, I mean, this is not gigantic stuff, but it was stuff that had us both uncomfortable. And I walked away from that, and it wasn't until I was mid this week, I had no intention of talking about it, and I went, that's what that was. Like, that's the blessing of having people in your life who function as authorities. Let me ask you, who are the people? Who are the authorities in your marriage? Who are the people outside of your marriage that can challenge you? Who are the people that you're setting your dreams next to them? And they're being scrutinizers of those dreams, not in a way that's unjudicious, but in a way that's wise. Like, are you aware of the blessing that it is to be an image bearer of God? And yet have you kept in mind the way the story works? That what was given to you as a blessing quickly became the means. It quickly became the end. That you suddenly went like, not only am I so grateful to have responsibility and to be alive, I want to be the authority. I don't want to answer to anybody because they're all wrong and I'm more right than any of them. Listen to the way Romans 13 speaks. And this, I mean, I don't know that I've ever preached on this verse, nor will I ever again, because it's one of the most uncomfortable passages in the entire Bible. Just listen to this. Just don't think about taxes or anything like that as I read this. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there's no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For ruler hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of the one who in authority? Then do what is right, and you'll be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good, as long as he's Republican. No, it doesn't say that. Just saying. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. See, Paul inherited a community of people who believed that their job was to overthrow authority with whatever means possible and establish God's authority. And Paul was saying to them, no, God created a world in which there need to be authorities. God created you as a person who needs to be under authority. And yeah, it's messy and there's lots of questions unanswered there. But if nothing else, I think the question Paul is begging is, how do you feel of God's authority? See, if Jesus is the solution to the problem is rooted in God is not good and cannot be trusted. And the solution is Jesus going, there's no one better. There's no better leader. There's no better authority. I'm going to come. I'm going to bear the weight of your transgression. I'm going to hit reset for you. But that's going to mean agreeing to something that you couldn't in the garden, that I'm under God's authority. And I'll end here. I think the haunting question of Romans 13 is it really possible to say I'm under God's authority while not being able to point to a human authority that you've subjected yourself to? Is it really possible to, with integrity, go, yeah, I follow and I'm under and I've surrendered to this authority that I can't see, but all these guys are a bunch of schmucks. I don't follow any of them. Is that even possible? And is part of what God has created here a system that says, you want to surrender to me? Well, then surrender to others too. Listen, if you're someone here and what it means to follow Jesus is a mystery to you, what it means to follow Jesus is to conclude that the God of the Bible is king, that this is his and you are his, and there's no place better to be than under his authority. And that Christ makes that possible in a way that simply wasn't accessible before the cross and the resurrection.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.